She posted that everything on my lawn was free while I was inside grabbing coffee, and within 10 minutes some guy in a bathrobe walked off with my weed whacker, and a woman took my patio furniture, while yelling thanks Karen. I thought it was a prank at first, until someone rolled up with a trailer, and took my barbecue grill, then showed me the Craigslist ad with my full address, and the headline free yard sale, everything must go. Turns out it wasn't a prank, it was a war, and Karen had started it with a smug HOA selfie at the bottom of the ad. But what she didn't know was this wasn't just a garage sale, this was a farewell event before I moved out, and I still had one weekend left in the neighborhood, which meant I had time for revenge, and hers would come in the form of a glittery gold vintage bike collection, and a little post of my own. Saturday had started out beautifully, the kind of breezy spring morning you'd want to bottle up and replay forever. My front yard was perfectly arranged like a well-organized thrift store, lawn chairs, spread out boxes labeled tools, books, kitchen decor, a cooler with sodas on the porch, and a little Bluetooth speaker playing oldies. Everything was in place, including the signs I'd posted around the block 2 days ago, brightly colored with arrows and times. A normal yard sale, nothing shady, just a guy trying to declutter before moving to another city. Karen, however, didn't like normal. Karen hated anything she couldn't control. She had that twitch in her jaw when she passed by something not HOA sanctioned. She'd been at war with bird feeders and wind chimes and solar lights last month. Now I was on her radar, but I hadn't expected full-blown sabotage. Her only interaction that morning had been a snide comment as she passed by during her 7 a.m. HOA patrol walk, something like, "Hope you got this pre-approved with the board." I laughed it off. I didn't need board approval. The HOA rules allowed for up to 2 personal garage sales per year, and this was my first since 2019. But just after 9 a.m. something changed. I was inside for no more than 7 minutes grabbing more change and a coffee when I heard shouting. When I stepped outside I froze. It looked like a flash mob had descended on my yard, people I'd never seen before tearing through boxes, loading items into wagons and SUVs. I ran out and yelled, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what are you doing? This isn't free." One lady holding my toaster yelled, "It's on Craigslist, said free stuff today, everything on the lawn." A man pushing my leaf blower chimed in. She said you were moving and wanted to donate it all fast. I pulled out my phone and asked the guy to show me the post, and sure enough, there it was, a full-color photo of my front yard, my address, and a big bold headline, "Everything must go free yard sale, help yourself," and there at the bottom like a signature, the same smug Karen selfie I'd seen on our HOA newsletter last month. She wasn't even subtle. The file name of the photo still had her name in it, Karen HOA Queen_JPEG. I told them all to stop, that it was a lie, but the damage had already begun. Half my tools gone, 2 coolers empty. One woman had walked off with my crockpot, and my speaker was now mysteriously silent and missing. I just stood there for a moment, jaw tight, fingers numb, not sure whether to scream or laugh. Someone in the distance yelled, "Thank you, mystery lady," and drove off with my foldable table that had been a gift from my late uncle. I took a deep breath, forced my brain to reboot, and went back inside. I wasn't going to cry over it. I wasn't going to let Karen win. Instead, I sat down, opened my laptop, and started planning. I still had 5 full days before moving, and suddenly I knew exactly what I'd spend them doing. Karen had just declared digital war, and I had a few weapons of my own, including a memory of her bragging about her vintage bike collection. During an HOA mixer last year, she had 8 rare bikes, each with custom parts, including one with gold detailing imported from Switzerland. They were her pride and joy, locked in a separate garage space she didn't even use for her car. I remembered her gloating about her backup garage code too, while drunk off a Chardonnay spritzer. She'd said something like, "I keep it simple, just my birthday reversed, easy to remember." Even better, I remembered her birthday because the HOA newsletter had thrown her a whole celebration last June. I was halfway through typing a calendar reminder when I paused. No, I wasn't going to break in or touch her property, not yet at least, but if she wanted to pretend things were free, I could play along in a very public and very satisfying way. That afternoon, after salvaging what little I could from the mess, I walked by her garage, just to scope things out. The bikes were still there, lined up behind the windows like museum pieces, spotless, polished, and smug, just like their owner. I saw the motion lights click on, but I didn't flinch, I just smiled. Karen had been watching me all morning. She wanted a show. Well, she was going to get one, and the next act was called Poetic Justice with a twist of Craigslist karma. I spent the rest of the day crafting a beautifully vague and totally legal ad: eccentric collector donating rare vintage bikes to good homes, Earth Day celebration bonus if you bring a helmet. And I left the address section intentionally blank, just the phrase neighborhood event, corner of Fairhill and Juniper, Saturday at 10 a.m. sharp, early birds welcome. Then I logged off and got some sleep. By Sunday morning I added one last touch: a row of brightly colored arrows copied directly from Karen's sabotage signs leading, not to my house, but to hers. I didn't put anything in front of her garage, I didn't touch a thing, but by 10 a.m. there were people walking her block with bike helmets, kids with their parents, older men with collector gear, and at least 2 people with Instagram live feeds. Karen came outside in a full-blown panic. As someone admired the bikes through the window, she started screaming at them to leave her property, threatening to call the police, and that was when I stepped outside with a coffee in hand, gave her a little wave, and said, "Just returning the favor, Karen." She didn't respond, not with words anyway, just slammed her door shut and killed the motion lights. I could hear her inside on the phone yelling at someone, and I assumed it was either the cops or the HOA president or both, but what she didn't know yet was that I hadn't posted her address, I hadn't broken any laws, and I hadn't actually given anything away. I just invited people to a public sidewalk on a sunny weekend with a hint of mystery and the perfect set of arrows. By noon the street had cleared, but the damage was done. The whispers had started, people wondering why Karen had a secret bike museum, and why she flew off the handle over a few kids looking through a window. She tried to file a complaint with the HOA that afternoon, but I'd already sent them a full statement with evidence of her original Craigslist post, and screenshots of her selfie watermark with the phrase, "everything free." The HOA wasn't pleased, they'd had enough of her petty antics lately, and now she'd created a scene that nearly ended in police intervention. Her reputation was cracking, and I hadn't even touched phase 2 of my plan, because this was only the beginning. She wanted to play games. Well, I'd just turned the board upside down, and Karen hadn't even realized the clock was ticking. The fallout from the fake free sale didn't just simmer quietly like Karen might have hoped. It spread through the neighborhood like a juicy rumor at a retirement brunch. Whispers danced over hedges and around sprinkler systems, and by Monday morning, nearly everyone on our cul-de-sac had heard some version of the story. The best part was, every version ended with the same punchline: Karen got a taste of her own medicine. But while she seethed behind drawn curtains and pretended nothing had happened, I wasn't finished. She had staged a fake giveaway of my possessions without remorse. So if she wanted war, I was about to show her just how creatively brutal I could be without ever breaking a single law. The thing with Karen was, she didn't just love control, she built her personality around it. Her home was practically a shrine to micromanagement. The lawn had those crisscross stripes only professional baseball fields should have. Her potted plants were arranged by bloom color and height. Even her mailbox had a little bronze HOA crest on it that she had engraved herself, which wasn't regulation, by the way, but she dared anyone to challenge her on it. And inside her temperature-controlled detached garage was her pride and joy, the bike collection. Now, calling them bikes didn't really capture it. These weren't just Schwinn's or rusty hand-me-downs. These were collector-level, custom-fitted machines, some with carbon frames, some with vintage badges and gold leaf detailing. She had one bike mounted on a wall stand, spotlighted like a piece of art. I had once overheard her telling a neighbor that the entire collection was worth more than the first house she and her ex-husband had bought. She never rode them. Oh no, Karen didn't sweat. She displayed them, polished them, worshipped them. The funny thing was, I knew how obsessed she was with their security because she wouldn't stop talking about it. Last summer at the HOA's ice cream social, after one too many glasses of boxed Chardonnay, she told a group of us about her brand new smart garage system. how it could be opened remotely, how it had a backup keypad just in case the app failed, how she was so clever for using her birthday in reverse as the override code. I had filed that away back then, amused that someone would brag about something that stupid. But now that she'd tried to ruin me? That detail felt like a checkmate in progress. Not that I was going to break in. That wasn't the game I was playing. What Karen had done to me was public sabotage. So I needed to respond with something equally public. Something poetic. Something that would sting not just her pride but her image. Because Karen didn't just value her bikes, she valued how people saw her bike. So I began phase 2 by crafting a completely innocent Facebook post. I started a neighborhood event. Spring Sustainability Celebration. Donate, swap, recycle. It wasn't fake. I even left out the word free this time. The idea was simple. Come to the corner of Fairhill and Juniper with any used bike gear, repair kits, or old frames, and let's celebrate Earth Day by giving second-hand items a new home. No money exchanged. Community fun only. I left the host name as Anonymous Organizer, and let the buzz build naturally. Then I added a note. Rare vintage bikes spotted on nearby properties. No photos. Just a casual mention. The neighborhood did the rest. By Thursday, I overheard 2 joggers outside my window speculating about the bike. One swore his brother saw a gold-plated model through a garage window. The other claimed there were rumors of a bike valued at $10,000 being part of the celebration. I didn't feed the fire. I just watched it burn. Karen must have sensed the shift in atmosphere, because she started posting in the neighborhood Facebook group again. Passive-aggressive posts like, reminder, private property is not public display, and some people don't understand what no trespassing means. But she didn't dare name me directly. Not after what happened last time. Not when the HOA was still reviewing the complaint I had filed against her. She was trying to play the victim while maintaining her queen bee composure. What she didn't realize was how carefully I was playing the long game. I printed out a flyer version of the Earth Day event and walked it around the neighborhood. I even dropped one in her mailbox. Not illegal, as long as it's not sealed or pretending to be official. I knew it would get under her skin. I imagined her flipping through it, seeing the phrase vintage bike sighting, and going into full meltdown mode. But the masterstroke came Friday night. I stayed up late crafting a second Craigslist post. Again, nothing criminal, nothing false. Just a simple event listing. Community bike exchange happening this weekend. Possible collector models present. Curbside display may be active near Fairhill and Juniper. I included no photos, no address, nothing traceable. Just enough to plant the idea in the minds of deal-hungry scavengers and vintage enthusiasts. By Saturday morning they came. Not as many as the chaos Karen had unleashed on my own yard, but enough to matter. Enough to be visible. A steady stream of polite browsers, riding by slowly, stopping near Karen's corner, trying to peek inside any open garages. She must have been foaming at the mouth. I stood on my porch sipping coffee, watching her from across the street. At around 10:30, she couldn't take it anymore. She stormed out of her house in Athletic, where she clearly hadn't exercised in, clutching a clipboard and barking at people to leave. She threatened to call the police. One teenager calmly pointed out that he was just standing on the sidewalk. Another woman laughed and said, "Is this not where the vintage bike thing was happening?" My friend saw a post. Karen turned purple. She went back inside, then came out minutes later with security cameras in hand. Real, mounted security cameras she had apparently unscrewed from her own porch, now holding them up like a madwoman. "I have you all on camera," she screamed. "Every last one of you." That's when someone finally did call the police. Not her. One of the onlookers. Because Karen, in her frenzy, had stepped onto her neighbor's lawn and was now screaming at a guy's 9-year-old son for loitering. When the officers arrived, I stayed quiet. I let them talk to the crowd. I let Karen rant. Then, calmly, I walked over with my phone, opened up her original fake Craigslist ad from last week, and showed them the image of my own lawn with her watermark. The officer looked at her, then at me, then chuckled and said, "Ma'am, maybe it's time to stop posting on Craigslist for a little while." Karen didn't respond. She just marched back into her home and slammed the door hard enough to shake her stupid mailbox crest. I knew I hadn't won yet, but I had struck a nerve deeper than any physical revenge could offer. She was unraveling, slowly and surely. And the best part? The next step didn't require anything from me at all. Just time. Because when someone like Karen gets cornered, she always makes one fatal mistake. All I had to do was wait. The morning after Karen's meltdown, the neighborhood was buzzing in the most deliciously quiet way possible. Nobody said anything directly, but every conversation had a current running beneath it. On dog walks and at mailbox stops, phrases like gold bike and sidewalk screaming and clipboard lunatic floated in the air like pollen. No one needed to mention names anymore. Everyone knew. Karen had crossed the line so many times that the line now lived on the opposite side of town. What she didn't know, though, was that the fallout from her tantrum hadn't peaked yet. Because when someone like Karen makes enough noise, the mess always circles back, louder than before, and this time it was the HOA that had finally run out of patience. Karen's reputation within the HOA had always been a mix of fear, fake smiles, and exasperation. She wasn't the president, God help us all if that had happened, but she was the self-appointed enforcer. She didn't just point out violations, she hand-delivered them, often unrequested. She would leave citations for decorative flags, basketball hoops, wind chimes, and even garden gnomes. She once reported a neighbor for having a birthday banner that stayed up one day too long. But after the fake Craigslist post about my yard sale and her unhinged bike-related meltdown, the complaints about her had reached critical mass. At first, she tried to defend herself in typical Karen fashion, flooding the neighborhood Facebook group with long, grammar-riddled rants and passive-aggressive memes. She claimed I had weaponized misinformation, whatever that meant, and accused half the neighborhood of trespassing. She even suggested the HOA should reimburse her for emotional damages, as if trauma caused by imaginary cyclists was something covered in the bylaws. Most people ignored her, some laughed, and a few started reposting her previous comments from other neighborhood disputes, and when viewed together, they painted a picture not just of an overbearing neighbor but of someone who thrived on conflict. It all came to a head when the HOA called an emergency board meeting. Not for a budget issue, not for planning the annual potluck, but specifically to deal with the multiple complaints about Karen's recent behavior. It was held in the community center on a Wednesday evening, and by the time I arrived, the parking lot was almost full. That was rare. Most HOA meetings were ghost towns, but this one? Standing room only. I sat near the back, arms folded, watching as Karen took her usual seat at the board table like nothing was unusual. She wore a red blazer and had her hair pinned in a tight bun like she was preparing to run for office. The president of the HOA, Mr. Taylor, an older man with an air of exhausted diplomacy, opened the meeting with a deep sigh and a smile that screamed, "I'm too old for this." They started by reading off community updates. Speed bumps approved, landscaping budget unchanged, new playground mulch schedule, and then, finally, Mr. Taylor tapped the microphone and said, "Now to the issue raised regarding member conduct and abuse of authority within the HOA." Karen straightened her posture, thinking they'd call her to comment. Instead, Mr. Taylor began reading a printed list. The fake Craigslist post about my yard sale. The dozens of aggressive Facebook messages. The public meltdown over the supposed bike giveaway. Her camera installation without approval. And a quote from a child's parent describing how Karen had yelled at their son for walking too slowly near her lawn. The tone was calm, but the list kept going, and with each item, Karen's face dropped just a little more. Her smile cracked by the time they reached threatening neighbors with fabricated citations. She interrupted. She always did. Her voice rose as she tried to justify her actions, saying she was just doing what the HOA should have done and that if anything, she should be praised for her vigilance. But nobody was buying it. When she said that her actions were in line with community values, someone in the crowd laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. Mr. Taylor then introduced a motion, proposed by a board member named Lisa, to formally remove Karen from any leadership or enforcement roles and prohibit her from acting in any official HOA capacity, present or future. The room was silent as the vote was called. 14 in favor. 1 opposed. The one was Karen, of course. But it didn't matter. The moment the motion passed, Karen's entire demeanor shifted. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She stood up calmly, muttered that this was a witch hunt, and walked out of the room like a robot that had just lost its programming. The board moved on to the next agenda item, but no one was really listening anymore. The reign of Karen had officially ended. The next few days were oddly peaceful. For the first time in years, the neighborhood felt lighter. Kids played in their front yards without being told their sidewalk chalk was graffiti. Neighbors greeted each other more warmly. A few people I barely knew stopped me to say they'd heard what Karen had done to me and that I handled it better than they would have. I wasn't looking for praise, but I appreciated it. And I knew that the best part wasn't just that Karen was dethroned, it was that she had dethroned herself. But Karen wasn't done. Not entirely. I saw the flicker of defiance in her eyes as she walked out of that meeting. She wasn't the kind of person to let things go. She would find another way to lash out. And as expected, her next move was both pathetic and predictably dramatic. 2 days later, I spotted a strange man parked across from my house in a rusted black sedan. He sat there for over an hour, pretending to check his phone but clearly watching my home. Then again the next day, same car, same time. So I walked over, knocked on his window, and asked if he needed help. He stammered something about a delivery app glitch and drove off. But I recognized his face from a photo Karen had once posted. Her nephew, the so-called private investigator she bragged about. She was trying to catch me doing something illegal. The irony was rich. I hadn't broken a single law. But she was so desperate for revenge that she'd now resorted to surveillance. I considered filing a report but held off. I wanted her to dig her own grave with her paranoia. Sure enough, a week later, I received a letter from a law office Karen had probably hired on some discount site. It accused me of public harassment, property damage, slander, and defamation. There was no evidence provided, just a dramatic 4-page document littered with misquotes and vague threats. I brought it straight to my attorney, who laughed so hard he nearly dropped his coffee. He drafted a single-page response that basically said, in the absence of any supporting evidence, we consider this matter closed. Karen didn't reply again. Her last shot had fizzled out like a firecracker in the rain. And slowly, she began to fade from view. Her garage stayed shut. Her patrols stopped. Her posts in the neighborhood forum vanished. The HOA didn't even remove her forcibly. She just stopped showing up. What surprised me most wasn't that she gave up. It was how fast people moved on. Karen had built her image around dominance and control, but once she lost that grip, no one missed her. In fact, the HOA voted to create an official social committee, and I was asked to join. They wanted someone with a sense of humor. I told them I'd think about it. By the end of the month, the memory of the Great Bike Fiasco had taken on a legendary tone. Someone even made t-shirts that said free stuff unless Karen says so and passed them out at the next HOA barbecue. I didn't wear mine in public, but I kept it. A souvenir of how good it felt to take on a tyrant without stooping to their level. And best of all, I wasn't done yet. Because karma had one more ride to offer. And this time, it was going to be personal. The strangest part about the quiet after Karen's downfall wasn't the silence itself, it was how artificial it felt. Like the calm you get before a tornado, when everything stops moving but you know it's only temporary. Karen had gone quiet, but that didn't mean she had given up. People like her don't vanish. They retreat, they sulk, and then they plot. I kept telling myself she'd try something else, something sneakier, more passive-aggressive. I just didn't expect her next move to involve security cameras, a fake witness, and a restraining order request so weak it practically folded itself. I started noticing small things first, like how the same two cars began circling the neighborhood each afternoon around 4. One was a beige Toyota with tinted windows. The other was a black Ford sedan with one broken taillight. Neither car belonged to anyone who lived nearby. I'd learned the makes and models of most of my neighbors' vehicles after a decade in the same house, and these didn't belong. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe a new delivery driver. Maybe someone visiting a relative. But by the third day, when I noticed one of the cars parked across from my house with a dash-mounted camera pointed directly at my front door, I knew I was being watched. I walked out calmly, phone in hand, and took pictures of the car, the license plate, the driver, who pretended to look at his phone, and the angle of the camera. When I stepped a little closer, he rolled the window down and stammered something about GPS directions. I didn't press him, but I made a point of snapping one last close-up before heading back inside. I posted the photos on the neighborhood forum under the caption "Unknown Car Watching Houses on Fairhill." Karen didn't comment, of course, but the car didn't come back for 3 days. The day it returned, I had a little surprise ready. My brother, who's in real estate, had loaned me a camera drone with excellent resolution and a remote speaker. As soon as the black Ford pulled up and idled again, I launched the drone from the backyard. It hovered about 20 feet above the car, and through the speaker I said, "You're being recorded. Please explain your presence or move on." The driver panicked and drove off so fast he clipped the curb and set off his own car alarm. It was petty, yes, but it felt good. A small taste of how exhausting it was to live under constant observation, something Karen had inflicted on others for years. 2 days later, I got a letter in the mail that nearly made me laugh out loud. It was from a law office in town I'd never heard of, claiming to represent Karen. The document was a formal request for a cease and desist, accusing me of surveillance, harassment, public defamation, and property interference. It referenced a long list of incidents, including the Earth Day event, which it called a targeted harassment stunt, and claimed I had repeatedly passed by her property to incite unrest. There was no evidence attached, of course, just Karen's dramatic language in legal font. The best part was a line that said my drone activity posed a threat to neighborhood safety. I showed it to my attorney, who was already familiar with Karen's antics, and he laughed so hard he asked if he could frame the letter for his office wall. We sent back a polite but firm response demanding all accusations be withdrawn unless proof was provided, and included a reminder that her original Craigslist stunt could be interpreted as defamation on her part, especially since we had screenshots of the post bearing her selfie. There was no reply. But Karen didn't stop there. Her next step was even more ridiculous. She filed for a restraining order at the local courthouse, alleging I had engaged in a campaign of terror against her. Those were her exact words. Terror. The hearing was scheduled a week later, and by that time, word had spread. Karen, as usual, couldn't keep things quiet. She hinted on Facebook that she was dealing with legal matters and claimed to be defending her rights against stalker-level behavior. At the courthouse, I arrived 10 minutes early in a polo shirt and khakis, calm and ready. Karen showed up dressed like she was going on trial for her life. Long dark coat, giant sunglasses indoors, and what I'm pretty sure was a fake limp. She carried a massive binder of papers and walked in like she was about to present the crime of the century. When it was her turn to speak, she launched into a 15-minute monologue about how she had been victimized by neighborhood hostility. She waved around screenshots of my Facebook event post, the Craigslist bike listing, and a blurry photo of my drone from what looked like a home security cam. She tried to claim that I had published her address online, which wasn't true. Then she said I had manipulated public opinion to make her look unstable. The judge raised an eyebrow when she said that. Then it was my turn. My attorney laid it out methodically. We presented screenshots of her original free yard sale post, including her selfie watermark. We showed timestamps from the day of her so-called harassment meltdown. We submitted public forum posts of Karen arguing with neighbors going back 6 months. We even brought a few character statements from local residents describing how she had threatened them with fake citations. The judge barely took 5 minutes to respond. There is no evidence of harassment here. Your complaint is denied. I suggest you both stay off social media and focus on being respectful neighbors. Case dismissed. Karen looked like someone had just unplugged her from the wall. She didn't argue. She didn't even speak. She grabbed her binder and stormed out, sunglasses back on like she was trying to keep her dignity from leaking out in front of strangers. I watched her go and felt no anger, just relief, and a quiet confidence that whatever she tried next, it would backfire just like this had. Later that week, I found out from a mutual neighbor that the HOA had formally restricted Karen from accessing their internal systems. That meant no more advance notices, no document edits, and no newsletter submissions. She was a member in name only now. Her power had been completely severed. The same neighbor told me Karen had tried to report a sidewalk planter someone had installed, and her complaint had been automatically filtered as irrelevant by the new HOA board guidelines. Apparently they had created a new protocol called Karen filtering, which automatically deprioritized non-emergency complaints from repeat reporters. It was exactly as satisfying as it sounds. One final cherry on top arrived on a quiet Saturday. A delivery van pulled up to Karen's house and dropped off a massive package. It was clearly a bike box, the kind with bold red tape and logos for high-end brands. The neighborhood group chat lit up with speculation. Someone joked that she had ordered a replacement for the one that got away. Someone else said maybe it was a decoy, a symbol to reclaim her status. Either way, I watched her drag the box inside, clearly aware that the entire street was watching her do it. She hadn't been seen in weeks, but now she was making a show again. Except this time there were no flyers, no speeches, no glares. She was done with open warfare. Karen had entered the final stage of her fall, the silent resentment phase. She wouldn't lash out anymore. Not publicly, but she would seethe. And that suited me just fine. Because I wasn't done. Not quite. I had one last move. Not out of malice. Just completion. One final twist to remind her that for all her posturing, she had started something she never really controlled. And soon she'd see that the last laugh had already been packaged, shipped, and set to arrive exactly when she'd least expect it. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes the best revenge is quiet, public, and perfectly legal. Karen thought she could humiliate me with a simple prank. Instead, she taught the whole neighborhood what happens when control becomes obsession. And me? I just leaned into it, gave away her bike collection, gave her a taste of her own medicine, and walked away with the one thing she never expected me to keep: my dignity.